My mother-in-law's hand rose, ready to strike me across the face, as it always did when I defied her. But this time, my fingers closed around her wrist in midair, stopping the slap before it landed. "It's over," I whispered, my voice vibrating through the room. "From now on, your lives are no longer my problem." And before their astonished eyes, I pulled out the white envelope that changed everything. It was 5 a.m., and my phone's alarm went off. The same daily ritual of the last 5 years was beginning. I, Lauren, rubbed my eyes before getting out of bed. Beside me, Matt, my husband, was still sound asleep. His breathing was peaceful, oblivious to all the burdens that actually weighed on his shoulders too. But I knew his burden was different from mine. My first destination was the kitchen. The silence of this enormous, stately co-op always felt cold in the early morning. It was the apartment inherited from Matt's parents, majestic, with a balcony overlooking Central Park and antique furniture. But to me, it felt more like a museum housing bitter memories. I started heating water for the coffee. A black coffee, strong with no sugar. The favorite of Mr. Arthur, my father-in-law. It had to be perfect, neither too strong nor too weak. I had been trying for 5 years to find that exact point, but there was always something to complain about. As the aroma of coffee filled the air, I heard the sound of footsteps. Miss Helen, my mother-in-law, had already come down, perfectly put together, her hair in a flawless bun, even if it was just to sit at home. Her sharp eyes immediately scanned the room, looking for something out of place. "Good morning, Helen," I greeted her, trying to inject some warmth into my still hoarse voice. She just gave a short nod and sat in her chair at the head of the dining table. "What's for breakfast?" "Don't give me the usual. I'm bored with it. There's freshly made quiche, pronounced quiche, and toast with avocado and smoked salmon." "Helen," I reply, eyed as I place the plates. We'll see how it tastes." Matt finally appeared, kissed his mother's forehead, and came over to me. "Good morning, Lauren." "Let me help you," he whispered. But as usual, Mrs. Helen was already calling for him. "Matt, come sit here. Your father and I want to talk to you about the new car." Matt shot me an apologetic look before obeying his mother's call. My heart always sank a little seeing him like that. He was a good, loving man, but in front of his parents, he was like a little boy, afraid of making a mistake. Mr. Arthur appeared next with the day's newspaper under his arm. He sat down, accepted the coffee I offered him, took a sip, and then wrinkled his face. "Is this coffee or dirty water? It tastes strange." "I'm sorry, Arthur. I made it just like always," I replied, holding my voice steady. "Well, pay more attention tomorrow." Breakfast passed in a tense silence broken only by the clinking of silverware. I ate standing up in the kitchen, an unwritten tradition that made me feel like I was never part of that family at that table. I was the provider, the servant, the financial pillar. My salary as a senior director at a multinational consulting firm paid for everything. The co-op fees for this enormous apartment, the utility bills, the maintenance, the gourmet groceries for the month, the private university tuition for Matt's 2 siblings, and even the pocket money for my in-laws' whims. When they finished, I cleared the table. Matt helped me carry the dirty dishes. "I'm sorry about before, Lauren. They're under a lot of pressure," he whispered. "What pressure, Matt?" "The pressure of deciding which country club to join this year," I asked, unable to contain myself. My voice sounded more bitter than I intended. Matt sighed. "I know it's hard, but they're my parents. My father's business went bankrupt. His pride is shattered. We have to help them." "Helping and being exploited are different things, Matt," I said quietly before going into the kitchens. By 8 a.m., I was ready for work. Power suit, heels, discreet makeup. In front of the mirror, I saw a woman with tired eyes but straight shoulders. The strong Lauren, The unbreakable Lauren. That was the mask I put on every day. Outside, Mrs. Helen was chatting animatedly with a neighbor about her plans for a Mediterranean cruise next month. Financed by me, of course. I kissed Matt's cheek as he read the news on his phone. I'm off. Drive safe, honey. We'll talk tonight, okay? His eyes were full of a promise I had often heard but rarely seen fulfilled. Sure, I replied dryly. In the car on the way to the office, I could finally take a deep breath. Here, I wasn't Lauren, the servant daughter-in-law. I was Lauren, the respected professional. But the weight on my shoulders felt heavier and heavier. The picture of my married life looked beautiful from the outside. A stately apartment, a nice car, a complete family. But the paint was starting to chip, revealing a fragile, rotten canvas underneath. I began to wonder, how long would I have to live in this false painting? I hoped for only one thing, that Matt would one day find the courage to help me repair that canvas before it tore completely. That day was the anniversary of my mother's passing. As always, I took a moment of silence in my room before heading to work. I opened a small jewelry box in the secret drawer of my dresser. Inside, I kept a pearl necklace from my grandmother and a simple gold ring with a jasmine flower engraved on it. The ring was the only valuable thing my mother had ever owned. She always wore it, even when her hands were wrinkled. She said the ring was a reminder to always be strong and fragrant like a jasmine, no matter where you were planted. I stroked it, feeling as if it were infusing me with strength. Mom, give me strength today, I whispered before carefully putting it back and locking the drawer. When I returned from work, there was a small family meeting. Mrs. Helen announced her plans for the upcoming Easter celebration, which would of course require a considerable amount of money. I just nodded, mentally calculating the budget I would have to readjust. That night, when I went to get my night cream from the same drawer, my heart skipped a beat. The jewelry box was there, but my mother's jasmine ring was gone. Panic seized me. I emptied the drawer, searched every corner, even got on my knees to look on the floor. Nothing. My chest tightened. I went straight to Matt, who was watching TV in the living room. Matt, have you seen my mother's gold ring? The one with the jasmine engraved on it? I asked, my voice trembling. No, Lauren. The last time I saw it, you were putting it away, he said, starting to notice my agitation. Yes, it was there this morning, and now it's gone. The small commotion attracted the attention of my in-laws, who were playing chess on the terrace. They came into the room. Gone? You probably put it somewhere else, Lauren. You're so busy with all that work. Your memory is playing tricks on you, said Mrs. Helen, shaking her head. That's impossible, Helen. I'm very careful with that ring. I keep it here and this drawer is always locked, I retorted, trying to hold back tears. Mr. Arthur smirked disdainfully. You could have forgotten to lock it. Or maybe, he paused, looking at me in a way that made me uncomfortable. You needed some quick cash for something and sold it on the sly. It's okay. Just say so. We'd understand. That hurt more than a slap. The tears I had been holding back finally fell. What, Arthur? How can you accuse me of something like that? It was my mother's. It's priceless. Of course. And since it's priceless, I'm sure they gave you a lot for it. Mrs. Helen replied with a logic that tore my soul apart. I looked at Matt, pleading with my eyes. Say something. Defend me. Matt stood up pale. Mom, Dad, don't accuse her like that. Lauren would never sell that ring. Matt, you're too trusting. I know what these careers our women are like today. They need money to keep up appearances, to maintain a status at the office. They earn a lot, but what do they spend it on? Mrs. Helen continued. Her words were like a slow, creeping poison. I couldn't take it anymore. I work hard not to keep up appearances, but for this family, for the standard of living you and Dad demand. See, she's already on the defensive. It's a sign of guilt, Mr. Arthur declared, raising his voice. The argument ended with me running to the bathroom, crying uncontrollably. Matt knocked on the door, begging me to come out, apologizing, but his words sounded empty. He couldn't stop their cruel accusations. He didn't dare tell his parents firmly, "Enough, Lauren is innocent." That night, for the first time since we were married, I slept in the guest room, not out of anger at Matt, but out of a profound pain and betrayal. The bed felt cold. I hugged the pillow, imagining my mother's warm smile. The ring was gone, and not just the ring, but also the last shred of security I had in that house. I felt like a suspicious stranger in the place that was supposed to be my home. Who had dared to take it, and why? The following days were grim. I was like a robot. Wake up, work, come home, take care of everything, sleep. Communication with Matt was cold. With my in-laws, it was icy. They continued to make snide remarks about honesty and gratitude. One Wednesday afternoon, my boss let me leave early because we had closed a big project. It was barely 3 p.m. As I opened the front door, I saw that Mr. Arthur's car was gone. Normally, he never went out at that time. The apartment seemed deserted. I entered quietly, taking off my shoes. I was about to go straight up to my room to change when whispers coming from my in-laws' bedroom made me stop dead in my tracks. They were serious and somewhat tense, but if she finds out, it was Mrs. Helen's voice. She won't find out. Besides, it's for our own good. Lauren's salary isn't enough if we want to truly recover, Mr. Arthur replied. My heart started pounding. I pressed myself against the cold door. I knew I shouldn't be listening, but my instinct was powerful. They were talking about me. I took the ring to the pawn shop this morning. They gave us a good amount. It can be the seed money for that stock market investment my friend offered me. In a year, it could double, Mr. Arthur said with pride. The world stopped. My breath caught in my throat. The pawn shop. My mother's ring. So, it was them. They didn't just take it, they stole my most precious memory and pawned it without a second thought to finance an investment. Fine, but don't be careless. If Lauren asks again, we'll tell her we've asked all the housekeepers who have worked here that one of them must have stolen it. She'll believe it. She's so good, Mrs. Helen said in a tone so cold and calculating it made my skin crawl. Yes, she's too good, too easy to control. She's only good for making money and obeying. And Matt doesn't dare contradict us either. Everything is perfect. They chuckled, a laugh at my stupidity, at my goodness, which they saw as a weakness. My tears flowed freely, but this time they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of a boiling rage, of a searing disappointment, and of a bitter revelation. All this time I hadn't been a daughter-in-law. I hadn't been family. I had been an income source, a walking, obedient ATM who, even when robbed of her most beloved possessions, could only cry in the bathroom. My trembling legs carried me backward, silently, out of the apartment. I sat on a bench in the park across the street, breathing in fresh air that couldn't quell my nausea. It was then that a resolve was born, a resolve as hard as steel that replaced all the pain and doubt. I've been the good person they treat badly for long enough. My mother used to say, "Be strong and fragrant like a jasmine." A jasmine is fragrant, but its roots cling tightly to the earth. It was time to show the strength of my roots. They thought they had won the game. They thought I would remain silent, working and handing everything over to them. They were wrong. The submissive Lauren died that afternoon. The one who was resurrected was the Lauren who would defend her being, her dignity, and the last legacy of her mother. I dried my tears, took a deep breath, and a faint smile formed on my lips. Very well. If they wanted to play war, they would get one. But this war wouldn't be fought with shouts or tears. It would be fought with intelligence, calm, and a perfect plan. They wouldn't see it coming. My first step was to go back home as if I knew nothing, smiling more sweetly than usual. The game had just begun. In the days after discovering the bitter truth, I was like an actress playing the greatest role of her life. Every morning, my smile was sweeter, my greeting kinder, even to Mrs. Helen, who always criticized breakfast. I prepared the coffee with the exact point of bitterness I thought she liked. And when she still complained, I simply tilted my head and said, "I'm sorry, Helen. I'll do better tomorrow." In a perfectly submissive voice. At the table, I started listening more attentively when they talked about their plans. I saw the new neighbors, the Garcias, pronounced Garcias, vacationing in the Canary Islands. "They say it was on a deal," Mrs. Helen complained one morning. "Wow, that must be very expensive," I responded with a sympathetic face. "But if you feel like it, maybe for the next semester we could plan something. I'm reviewing the budget." Helen's eyes lit up. "Really, Lauren? You would take care of that?" "Of course. For your happiness, I'll do what I can." My words were like honey, and they drank them up with joy. Matt noticed my change in attitude with surprise. When we were alone in the room, he asked, "Lauren, are you okay?" I was worried after the thing with the ring. I looked at him with a soft smile. "I've realized, Matt, maybe I've been too and say, they're your parents. Maybe I should be more understanding that they're trying to get through a bad time." My words sounded so sincere that Matt hugged me tightly. "Thank you, Lauren. I promise you, one day we'll be happy on our own." "I'm looking for business opportunities," he whispered. His sincerity moved me, but it also saddened me. Matt's promises were like shadows. They were always there, but you could never catch them. For now, I had to focus on my own plan. Behind that submissive smile, my mind was working with cold, calculated precision. At work, behind my imposing desk, I began to move my pieces. First, I contacted my family's attorney, who had handled my mother's estate. I explained the situation without emotion, as if I were presenting a financial report. "So, you want to file for a separation of assets with your husband and secure your current assets?" asked Mrs. Davis, the attorney. "Exactly. I want everything legally clear, and I also need help tracking a valuable family heirloom that I suspect has been pawned without my permission." I gave her a detailed description of the ring and an old photo of my mother wearing it. Mrs. Davis nodded with an understanding look. "We'll handle locating the pawned item. If it can be traced and proven to be your property and was pawned without your knowledge, it can be a very solid legal basis." The second step was the bank. I transferred all my personal savings, investments, and emergency funds to a new account at a different bank solely in my name. I did it gradually in amounts that wouldn't attract attention so as not to set off any alarms. I also canceled all the additional credit cards my in-laws used with the excuse that the bank was conducting a security verification. Every evening upon returning from work, I continued to bring small treats. Mrs. Helen's favorite pastries or an economics magazine for Mr. Arthur. "Helen, I saw there was a special at the bakery and thought of you." These small gifts further convinced them that I had reverted to being the submissive, manageable Lauren, and they grew more and more comfortable exposing their plans. "Lauren, my niece's wedding is next month. We have to give a generous envelope. We can't look cheap," Mrs. Helen requested one night. "Of course, Helen." "How much is customary?" I asked, taking notes on my phone as if it were an important shopping list. "Minimum $1,000. We are an important family. We have to keep up appearances." I nodded. "Understood. I'll set it aside." In my room, that note wasn't a shopping list, but a list of grievances. Every request, every complaint, every plan that drained my energy and my wallet, I documented meticulously. Date, amount of money, and the reason they gave. It was my collection of evidence to strengthen my position. One night, when everyone was asleep, I went out onto the balcony. The night air caressed my skin. I looked at the stars in the dark sky and thought of my mother. "Mom," I whispered, "maybe I can't be as fragrant as a jasmine like you were, but I will be as strong as its roots. I will protect everything you left me." A pang of guilt crept in. I was becoming calculating, but then I remembered the sound of their cold laughter behind the door. I remembered how they pawned my mother's ring without hesitation. This wasn't malice. It was self-defense. It was a war to regain control of my own life. I took a deep breath. The preparation phase was almost complete. The attorney had sent the draft of the postnuptial agreement. The details of the pawned ring were being tracked. My accounts were secure. Soon I would give them the biggest surprise of their lives. And for that, I had to remain patient, keep smiling, and continue playing my role as the ideal daughter-in-law until the time was right. I returned to the room and looked at Matt, sleeping peacefully. It saddened me because in my grand plan, he would also be hurt. But his final choice would determine which side he would take. Or, as usual, perhaps he would choose none at all. A month passed, and I became a very patient spectator and an excellent listener. Every weekend, when the family gathered in the living room, I would sit on the sidelines, listening intently. "The stock market is booming, but more capital is needed," Mr. Arthur commented one afternoon, glancing at me. "Oh, what a shame." "But I'm sure you'll find a solution, Arthur," I replied with false enthusiasm. "If you need it, I can help you look up information on small business loans for entrepreneurs." They were increasingly convinced I was on their side. Even Mrs. Helen started complaining about more trivial things, like the housekeeper, who she claimed was inefficient. "Lauren, you find a new one. I want one who is young and strong. I want to train her from scratch." "Of course, Helen." "I'll start looking next week," I replied, thinking that soon they would be the ones needing to look for work. The climax came at the end of the month. Just a week before payday, they held a family meeting without me, of course. I came home a little later on purpose and could hear their animated voices from outside. I didn't need to eavesdrop. I could already guess the content. The next day, Mrs. Helen approached me as I was tending to a small garden I had started on the balcony. "Lauren, your father and I want to talk to you." I stopped what I was doing and greeted her with a smile. "Yes, Helen." "What's wrong?" "You see, Matt's siblings need more money for their final year projects and our monthly allowance. Well, with the rising prices, we think it needs to be increased. Also, I've been thinking of joining a new social circle with very important people. The entry fee is considerable, but the prestige is enormous." She mentioned a figure that, although I was prepared for it, still took my breath away inside. The sum was almost half my salary. It was their final test. How far could they push me? I didn't answer right away. I looked at the small jasmine pot I had planted myself as a reminder of my mother. Its flowers were in full bloom, fragrant. I took a deep breath and looked at her, my face showing serious concentration. "That's a significant request, Helen." I paused for a moment, seeing the hope in her eyes. "But for the family, I'll try. Give me until payday. I'll arrange everything." Mrs. Helen's face lit up. She even touched my shoulder, an incredibly rare gesture of affection. "I knew you were a good girl. Matt is lucky to have you." When she left, my smile vanished. It was enough. This was the irrefutable proof of their limitless greed. I had given them enough rope to hang themselves. The last few days before the big day were spent perfecting everything. The attorney finalized all the documents. The postnuptial agreement, which clearly stated that all assets acquired through my own efforts were my exclusive property, was ready to be signed. The official certificate from the pawn shop, successfully tracked by the lawyer, confirming that a ring matching the specifications of my mother's had been pawned by Mr. Arthur, was also in a pristine blue folder. I had even rented a small, modest apartment as their future residence. I didn't want them to end up literally on the street. I wanted them to experience a simple life earned through their own efforts. I also prepared a resignation letter from my position as the family treasurer, written in formal cold language that detailed all the expenses of the last year, along with the notes of their requests I had been taking. The night before payday, Matt seemed nervous. "Lauren, are you really going to give them that much money tomorrow? It's a huge amount. You'll barely have anything left for yourself." I looked at him. A small spark of hope ignited in my heart. Maybe he would finally defend me. "What should I do, Matt? Tell me, please. Your mother has already asked for it." He was silent for a long time, looking at the floor. "I'll try to talk to them to reduce the amount. That way, Santa defense." It was a negotiation. My last hope was extinguished. "Don't worry, Matt. Tomorrow, everything will be clear and everything will change." He looked at me confused, but I just gave him a small smile before turning off the light. I couldn't sleep. My heart pounded, imagining the scene the next day. I was scared, of course, and anxious, but behind it all, I felt an immense relief, like someone who has held their breath for a long time and can finally let it out. Tomorrow, the masks would fall. Tomorrow, the real Lauren would appear. The day arrived. Friday, payday. The atmosphere at home was different. Normally they acted normal, but today Mrs. Helen seemed especially dressed up. Mr. Arthur was busy checking something on his phone, perhaps information on the stock market or real estate. They looked like hunters who could already see their prey. I got dressed for the office as usual, but with the mindset of a general going into battle. I received my salary transfer notification on my phone while still at the office. The amount, as usual, was substantial, but this time not a single cent would go to them. Upon returning home, I could feel their expectant gazes from the living room. They were even already seated neatly on the sofa. Matt was by their side, his face tense. "Ah, you're back. We were waiting for you." Mrs. Helen greeted me in an almost friendly tone. "Sorry, Helen. I had to finish a couple of things," I replied calmly. I placed my briefcase on a chair. Then, without changing my expression, I took out a thin brown envelope from inside. It was very different from the thick envelope I used to give them. I placed it on the table in front of them. "Here you go for this month's expenses." Mrs. Helen grinned from ear to ear and snatched the envelope with a swift movement. She tore open one end and pulled out its contents. A few bills and a letter. Her eyes counted the money quickly. The smile on her face vanished, replaced by an expression of confused yawn and a budding rage. "What is this? This isn't even a quarter of the usual." "It's not even enough for daily groceries," she shouted, waving the bills. Mr. Arthur jumped up and snatched the envelope from his wife. He looked at the contents and his face darkened. "Lauren, what is the meaning of this? This isn't a joke." Matt looked terrified. "Lauren, there must have been a mistake in the count. How is this possible?" he asked, trying to mediate. I stood tall, my hands at my sides. My voice was flat and calm, as if presenting a report at the office. "There is no mistake, Matt. That is the amount the three of you deserve." "What we deserve, Miss Is." Helen shrieked, jumping to her feet. "And who do you think you are to decide what we deserve? You're nothing but the daughter-in-law. Your obligation is to respect and support your in-laws." Now all the emotions I had repressed for months, all the bitterness, all the pain, I carefully arranged them into sharp, cold words. The room's atmosphere grew heated, but my own aura became even colder. "Obligation," I said slowly. "Let's talk about obligations. A daughter-in-law's obligation is to help, not to be squeezed dry. A family's obligation is to respect one another. not to exploit. Where is the proof that we exploit you? We only ask for what is ours, Mr. Arthur spat. Here is the proof, I said, pulling the blue folder from my briefcase. I showed them the copies of the report from the attorney in the pawn shop. A gold ring, an heirloom from my deceased mother with a jasmine engraving, was pawned by you, Arthur, on the 22nd of last month in your name. The value was considerable, you said, for an investment. In that instant, the color drained from their faces, from anger to a deathly pallor. They were stunned. Matt stared at the document with wide eyes. Dad, is this? Mr. Arthur tried to defend himself. It was for the good of the family, too. An investment. The good of the family? I interrupted, my voice beginning to rise, but still controlled. What good of the family? The kind that allows you to steal the only valuable memory I have of my deceased mother, and then have the audacity to accuse me of selling it. Mrs. Helen, speechless, tried to attack from another angle. You ungrateful girl. After everything we've given you, this house, your status as our son's wife, please, Helen. I cut her off again, giving her no chance. This house is an inheritance from Matt's parents, not a gift to me. Since when is being an ATM and a suspected thief an honor? I took a deep breath. It was time for the final blow. So no, that envelope is not a mistake. It's reality. The reality that as of today, you are officially independent without a single cent of my salary. That sentence hung in the air, heavy and piercing. The majestic living room suddenly felt like a courtroom, and I, Lauren, who had always been silent, had finally become the prosecutor reading all the charges. They stood there stammering as their comfortable, luxurious world collapsed in an instant because of a thin envelope and an undeniable truth. The show had just begun. The atmosphere in the living room froze. My words, without a single cent of my salary, still echoed in the air, sharp and final. Mrs. Helen's face, once pale, turned a deep red, a mixture of shame, surprise, and unbridled rage. Her eyes burned with a fire I had only seen when she was humiliating me. She said nothing. Her body moved before her mind. With a swift gesture that reflected an old habit of power, her hand rose, fingers together, ready to land on my cheek. It was the final punishment for the rebellious daughter-in-law. Matt shouted, "Mom, no!" But his body seemed glued to the sofa. Mr. Arthur just watched, aghast, still paralyzed by the proof of the pawned ring. I did not flinch. 5 years ago, or even 5 months ago, I would have probably closed my eyes, accepting the slap as the price for peace. But not anymore. As her hand descended rapidly, my instinct and my newfound determination reacted faster. My hand shot forward, not to block it harshly, but to firmly grip Mrs. Helen's wrist in midair, just inches from my skin. My grip was strong, filled with the new confidence I had kept hidden. Her skin felt cold and wrinkled in my palm. She was dumbfounded. Her eyes widened in disbelief. It was the first time in the history of our relationship that I had physically stopped her authority. "Let go of me," she shrieked, her voice broken with hatred. She tried to pull her hand away, but I held on. I wasn't squeezing to hurt her, but with enough force to send a clear message. "No," I replied. My voice was low, but it resonated with clarity in the tense silence. "I will not allow you to lay a hand on me again, ever." Everyone was frozen in that tableau. Matt, silent with an expression of shock and deep guilt. Mr. Arthur, speechless, his arrogance crumbling as he saw his wife physically subdued. Mrs. Helen was panting more from humiliation than from effort. I slowly released her wrist and she snatched her hand back as if it had been burned. "Are you insane, Lauren?" Mr. Arthur finally managed to say, but it was just a powerless growl. I stood up even straighter, looking at them one by one. You're the ones who are insane for thinking kindness is weakness and that you could keep squeezing me dry without consequences. My voice was stronger now, filling the room. It's time to face reality. I took the blue folder again and pulled out more documents. This is a copy of the post-nuptial agreement for separation of assets already registered with the attorney. Everything I have earned with my salary is my absolute property. This house is in Matt's in your name, Arthur. So do what you will, but the car you use is in my name. The credit cards have been canceled. The savings accounts you know about are empty. Matt stood up, shattered. Lauren, what have you done? Why did you take it this far? I looked at him. The pain in my heart resurfaced, but I suppressed it. I have done what you should have done a long time ago, Matt. Protect us, but you were too busy protecting their feelings. I pointed to my in-laws, forgetting that your partner was also being hurt. They pawned my mother's ring, Matt, and accused me of selling it. Now I directed all my words to Mr. Arthur and Mrs. Helen. For you two, this is the reality. You have two options. First, I report the case of the ring to the police as misappropriation of property. Or second, you leave this apartment and start living on your own. Impossible. This is our parents' home, Mrs. Helen screamed. Correct. So you can stay, but without electricity, water, or food paid for by me, and with a criminal case that will give your important friends plenty more to talk about. I replied coldly. I have rented a small, modest apartment for you for 3 months. Enough time for you to find jobs and start a new life. After that, you will be completely on your own. They fell silent, stunned. My detailed, relentless plan left them breathless. They were used to being in control, and now it had been completely taken from them. And you, Matt? I continued, my voice softer but firm. You are free to choose. Stay here with them or start something new. But our relationship needs real change, not just promises. Right now, I need space and time. I picked up my bag and the folder with my documents. The superintendent of the new apartment will come for you tomorrow morning with a moving van. Pack your personal belongings. The furniture and luxury items here you can sell if you need money, but remember it is no longer my responsibility. Without waiting for a reply, I turned and walked toward the door. My steps were firm, though my heart was pounding. Behind me, I heard Mrs. Helen's inconsolable sobs, no longer of anger, but of despair, and Matt's voice calling my name sadly. I didn't turn back. This chapter was over. I had just closed a dark book, and I wasn't going to open the same page a second time. The next day, I didn't go to work. I checked into a hotel near the office, giving myself time to breathe. I informed Matt via text that I would oversee the move from a distance and that he should ensure his parents cooperated. From the hotel window, my mind drifted to what had been my home. I imagined the chaos inside. The luxury items that had been their pride now had to be sorted. Which could they take to a modest 2-bedroom apartment? And which had to be left behind or sold? I pictured Mrs. Helen's face, probably swollen from crying all night, realizing that her social circles, her vacations, had all vanished like a dream. I also thought about Matt. Would he go with them, or would he stay alone in that enormous, silent apartment? The pain of leaving my husband was real, but the pain of remaining in a relationship that devalued and humiliated me was greater. Sometimes, to heal a deep wound, you have to make a clean cut. Around noon, I received a report from the apartment superintendent. The move was complete. The process was quiet, though, with many tears and protests from Mrs. Helen. They took several suitcases and boxes of clothes and personal effects. The rest they left for Matt to sell. I also received a message from Matt. It was long, filled with regret. He apologized for his neglect, his cowardice, and his silence when they hurt me. He said he had decided to stay in his parents' apartment for a while to make sure they were okay and to help them adjust. He wrote, I know this is the consequence of my actions. I'm not asking you to come back now, but please don't close the door on me forever. Give me a chance to prove I can change. I read it several times. Tears fell. Was there still love? Yes. But was it enough? Not yet. Trust is like a crystal plate. Once broken, you can try to glue it back together, but the cracks will always be visible. It takes a long time to repair, or perhaps it requires a completely new plate. A few days later, Ray turned to the apartment. It felt immense, silent, and empty. Mrs. Helen's shouts, Mr. Arthur's complaints were gone. I walked through each room, sat in the dining chair she used to occupy. I stood in the kitchen that had been my headquarters. Little by little, I began to clean. Not just the dust, but the negative energy clinging to every corner. I opened all the windows, letting in fresh air and sunlight. I moved furniture, changed the curtains, rearranged the living room. I wanted this apartment to truly become a place of peace, not of bitter memories. In the process, I found a small box hidden behind a cabinet in my in-laws' bedroom. It contained some letters and an old photo album. There were pictures of Matt as a child, photos from my in-laws' wedding, where they looked happy. I realized something. They weren't born bad people. Bankruptcy and the loss of their pride had turned them into human beings, filled with fear and greed. They tried to fill that void with luxuries and the approval of others, sacrificing me in the process. This knowledge didn't excuse their actions, but it gave me understanding. The resentment I felt slowly transformed into sadness. Sadness to see how a family could be destroyed by material things and status. Sadness because Matt was caught in the middle. I decided not to press legal charges for the ring as long as they never bothered me again. I had already retrieved the ring from the pawn shop. Holding it in my hand was like holding my mother's hand. I kept it safe in a bank's safe deposit box. That ring was the closing of one chapter and the beginning of a new one. 3 months passed. I lived alone in that renovated apartment. I filled it with plants, books, and relaxing music. I focused on my work and began to pick up abandoned hobbies, cooking for pleasure, not for criticism, and taking painting classes. I received news about my ex-in-laws through Matt. At first, it was very difficult. Mrs. Helen fell into a depression and refused to leave the apartment. Mr. Arthur was forced to take odd jobs as a private driver, something he would have previously considered humiliating. Life in the small apartment forced them to be humble. No housekeeper, no luxury shopping. They had to count every penny. However, slowly a change occurred. Matt told me that one day, Mrs. Helen started cooking for her husband. The taste might not have been perfect,